unpatched vulnerabilities in Microsoft Mac software, and too many screen recording notifications. This is MacVoices. MacVoices is supported by 1Password. More than just a password manager, now with extended access management. Find out more at onepassword.com/product/XAM. Welcome to MacVoices. This is the talk of the Apple community, and I'm Chuck Joyner. And folks, in case it isn't obvious, this is MacVoices Live. It's Tuesday night, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific, whatever time that is, wherever you are. You could be with us, as if you really would want to be with us, on YouTube at youtube.com/MacVoicesTV. We have a bunch of our friends landing in the chat room as we speak, and hopefully we may have one or two other panel members show up. We're a little late tonight because of a couple schedule conflicts. That just seems to be the way it is during the summer. You know, I had it for a couple weeks ago, and now we have some others, so that's life. We have a lot of stuff to get through tonight for a lot of different reasons. But before we do that, let's go around the room, see who's here, and then we'll dig in. So where he usually can be found, up in the top left of my screen, Mr. David Ginsburg. Dave, good to see you.
Good to see you, Chuck. Glad to be here. It's going to be a good conversation tonight, as always.
It always is, or at least a fun conversation, at the very least. Balancing him out on the top right of my screen, Mr. Brian Flanagan Arthurs. Brian, good to see you.
Thank you. So good to be here. Appreciate you having me.
Hey, and I even have a story picked out just for you tonight, Brian. So Stay tuned. Let's see. Right now, I've got my screen arranged so I've got four corners. So in the bottom left is Mr. Marty Gensius. Marty, good to have you. What's new there?
It's good to be here, Chuck. I'll let you know. It's been a rough weekend in the Gensius household. There's been no rest for the wicked. Our poor dog Kona took ill, and we had to take her in for emergency surgery. She had her spleen taken out, and I sat with the doctor, and the doctor explained the whole procedure. Dog's doing fine now. And I said, Doc, how much is this going to cost? And he said, a fully spec'd out Mac Studio.
Oh, my God.
And I looked at the dog, and I looked at the doctor, and I looked at the dog, and I looked at the doctor. And so I'm starting to call my dog Studio instead of her original name. And thank God Apple dropped their car. Otherwise, the surgery probably would have been more expensive.
Interesting that the doctor is now measuring things in terms of Apple products.
Yeah. For folks who want to know that pricing, just go on and do a fully spec'd out Mac Studio. Just don't press buy.
Wow. Scary. That's scary. Jim Ray is here, looking like Jim Ray. Jim, it's good to see you.
I also have four corners. Oh, not anymore. Now I've got a T.
Yeah, that's okay. That's okay. Good to have you. Joining us after a bit of an absence, Mr. Mark Fuccio. Mark, it's great to have you back. We've missed you. And as usual, you have an interesting background, but this one seems kind of obvious.
Yeah, we're getting into the end of August, and next thing we know, it's going to be Labor Day, and already in California, a lot of kids are back to school, so we're in the proverbial end of the dog days of summer, or the hot days of summer.
Good. Well, I'm glad to have you back. Glad to have you back.
It's good to be back.
Making a late entry and improving the sartorial image of MacVoices Live is Mr. Webb Bixby. Webb, it's great to see you, and I gather it's board day.
Today was executive committee, so yeah. So same thing. So they have all the powers of the board of directors. So
that's good. And you have my favorite quilt up. So
just for you. Yep.
I appreciate that. Well, guys, we have a lot to get through that I gathered up. The first one, though, seems like such an obvious place to start because it's something near and dear to our hearts. and that is that Microsoft has security flaws in some of the Mac apps that could let attackers spy on users. More disturbing about this, if you read the article, is that they knew about the flaws and opted not to fix them because it could interfere with some of the functionality that they prefer to have. I don't even know what to say except, all of a sudden now I've got even more reasons not to use Microsoft apps, but this just blows me away that they know the problems are there. They can't or won't fix them.
I unfortunately am in a system where I'm held hostage to Microsoft apps. So in running a Mac, so whether these security flaws are fixed on the Windows side was unclear to me, but it seemed to be this article was about the Mac versions of the apps, and so yeah, this is all about my work situation.
I think that applies to a lot of us, Marty.
I'm in the same boat. Yeah, I use it on my work Mac. But you notice that that Microsoft says they consider this a low risk. Teams OneNote and the Teams Helper apps have been modified to remove the entitlement, reducing the vulnerability. So they did something. Not enough.
And yeah, and we don't know. Jim, you're the only one that might be even partially qualified to answer this, but and there's probably not enough information. But I find it interesting that they chose those to fix, and maybe it's because they were easy to fix and the others not so much. But I would think that somewhere they would put a software switch in that if I don't need the capabilities, that there's a problem here, then let me turn those capabilities off and be secure. Let me make the choice instead of you making it for me. And oh, by the way, leaving the door unlocked so somebody can walk in.
Well, they probably, if they gave users a choice, then some users would choose to make it insecure, and then they could turn around and say, well, look, Microsoft exposed me to this. I don't know. You'd think doing what they're doing would also, but.
Well, Jim, that's the thing. You're right. You're absolutely right. Some people would just go ahead and say, oh, it'll never happen to me. But it bothers me a lot that I'm not even given that choice. Wow. Was that
I'm
all?
speechless. I got nothing.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to read the article, and I had seen it before, but I hadn't, not really with an eye towards commenting on it here. So,
yeah. Well, I mean, and that's why we throw it in the chats and in the show notes for other people to read it, and you can make your own judgments. And if you disagree with us, let us know. But I just shake my head at this again, and and I don't know if it's a case of the Mac apps being second-class citizens, or and how to naturally Microsoft is going to say, anybody would say, well, the risks are pretty low, but what are the risks?
Are third parties allowed to these support plugins from third parties? I don't use these programs, so I'm kind of surprised that because they're saying it needs to do this to allow unsigned library support plugins. I'm kind of surprised that there is such a thing as plugins in 2024 for these products. Does anybody know?
I can speak to that this much. I do know that there is a Zoom plugin that you can load that if you are using Outlook to schedule a meeting, that you can say, add a Zoom meeting, and it'll do the scheduling, the population, and everything automatically. So that's one plugin I know of. I don't know about some others. I believe there's some others, but I'm not sure.
I wonder if they have large enterprise customers that have their own plugins, because this language is weird. Unsigned libraries to support plugins. I can't imagine any commercial software company would be supplying unsigned libraries. So maybe that's just internal. So they may have some big customers that, in which case, I would think, yeah, why don't they just turn it off? And if the customer needs to do that, say they've got to enable it.
I don't know. It's just, I mean, and if I wanted to go back and look. If I remember correctly, one of the potential issues is your webcam, and they don't really tell you a lot about that. But just as a matter of course, I don't know what you gentlemen do as far as your webcam, but I have a webcam cover that is on mine.
Looking at this, it seems like what they're saying is you could install a library and the library can do anything. Which is kind of like saying, well, you could download software from the internet and it could do anything. So, it kind of surprises me that, like I say, why are they allowing untrusted libraries? There must be some reason, but they're not saying why. That's got to be something that almost nobody uses. But maybe there's some big customer that uses it, and I don't know. But
yeah,
so it's not specific. It looks to me like it's not specifically that the webcam or anything else is specifically vulnerable. It's just that if you can load arbitrary code, then anything's up for grabs.
Yeah, I'm hoping that in the coming week or so that some of the security people will be doing a lot more analysis of this and giving us more information, because this is just enough to whet your appetite, make you angry, and make you concerned. And I'd like to know just how much of a risk I'm running by using any of those apps, because like Marty, I'm kind of held hostage and have to.
Well, at the very last line, it says it was reported in 2021 that Slack and Discord were being used to deliver malware, which I guess it's, maybe they have plugins. So, yeah, I think it's kind of like, well, if you're going to allow plugins, then, this is, you've got this possibility.
Dave, do you know anything about Slack or Discord plugins?
No, I'm not too familiar with the Slack or Discord plugins as far as within any of the Microsoft 365 products.
Yeah.
I haven't seen anything. I mean, that's where enterprise comes in. I mean, plugins are very much managed, as I think we all know. So if this was a plugin, or if it's affecting a plugin, that easily can be removed. But yeah, this still seems pretty vague why they can't fix it.
Yeah. I'm sorry, did I interrupt someone there? I thought I heard somebody call. So, okay. All right, well, stay tuned. I doubt that this is the last we'll hear of this, and hopefully we can disseminate better information when it comes up.
Oh, I just have a final thought on this.
Oh, please, Mark.
I'm mindful of what my mother taught me. When you don't have anything nice to say nothing at all. And that's how I feel about Microsoft's behavior in this regard.
And Mark, I'm with you on that. The only thing is that I feel like it is something that people need to be aware of. Yeah. If there's any vulnerability, and that's why I wanted to bring it up here. I don't know how Marty, me, I won't speak for anybody else in the panel, but how we could avoid using Microsoft products. But so just be aware of it.
I don't know. I guess you could insist people send you, if you need a spreadsheet, send it to you in XLSX, which is an open source format that, pages that numbers can open, or send you documents in PDF format, and just stay away from any of the proprietary formats that require Microsoft apps, including Outlook. So I think somebody wrote in the chat room that they want to try to move to Apple Mail, which I recommend. I use it. I think is a great client. And Outlook, sometimes you have to get forced to use it, but there you go. You're opening yourself to that risk for a vendor that doesn't seem to care or just doesn't know what it's doing.
Today's Mac Voices is supported by 1Password Extended Asset Management. How do you keep your company's data safe when it's sitting on unmanaged apps and devices? 1Password Extended Asset Management. That's how. You and your IT team know that no matter how much training you provide and how many times you warn them, frontline employees are going to make mistakes. And the bad guys are getting better and better at helping them make those mistakes. Clicking on a bad link, using unapproved software, connecting to things they shouldn't connect to. Those kind of mistakes are exactly what 1Password Extended Asset Management can take care of. It secures every sign-in for every app on every device because it solves problems traditional IAM and MDM can't touch. It is security for the way we work today, and it's now generally available to companies with Okta and Microsoft Entra and in beta for Google Workspace customers. You need to know more, so right now, visit onepassword.com/product/XAM and find out how you can be more secure with 1Password Extended Asset Management. That's onepassword.com/product/XAM. Thanks to 1Password for supporting Mac Voices. So the next one is something that I know caused a big furor. I think we had a healthy little discussion on it here, but it really lit up the internet when Apple was going to require screen recording prompts to be addressed weekly. And now in the betas, that's been pushed back to monthly, which seems to be a lot more palatable. And I'm really anxious to find out how this group feels about that. It's going to be an annoyance. I've already got stuff that pops up, and I should start tracking it, that asks for permissions on a pretty consistent basis to refresh the permission to do certain things. Does this bother you? Once a week, I get it. Once a month, are you happy with that? Is that an adequate trade-off for protection?
No, not really. I mean, I think if anything, on the enterprise side of things, it's going to be a big nuisance because people are required to probably use that setting, and want it to stay, as a default of being turned on. And now it's going to require, the enterprise to circumvent that, or actually, maybe even have a script that has to run each time to allow it to be able to open it, because a lot of times you need administrative rights, and then many enterprises don't allow administrative rights on a Mac. So
I admit, Dave, I had not thought about the fact that you have to have administrative rights. So,
yeah. I mean, depending on the setting, but there's ways around that. You can, especially if you're using something like a MDM like Jamf, that you can have machines have a specific script, let's say, that's running and saying, hey, this has to run for this to be able to allow this to happen, to prevent someone from having to be granted admin rights for that temporary period, so they can.
Oh, Marty, you have thoughts.
I guess a question for any of the folks, but also Dave. I can just imagine when these things start popping up on screens, and the average user won't know what that means, or the unaware user, it's going to generate a lot of calls to IT. This thing just popped up on my screen. Should I click no or yes, or allow?
Get that all the time.
Yeah. My concern is, like EULAs, we will start to become desensitized through these things and just click through them if they're popping up all the time. So month is definitely better than a week. But there's more chance that I'll read it if it's not flooding my screen all the time.
I mean, I can anticipate a lot of continued pushback with this. I mean, they had already started pushing back, and it was in the early betas with it having weekly. Monthly is all better, but still, screen recording is is a slightly important tool that needs to be on when you're doing a lot of when you're using applications on a Mac.
Brian?
I was just curious. I wonder if if you had a reason why you'd want it to come up more often, could you have it? I see that setting there. It says, allow or open system settings. Can you request it more frequently if you want it?
That's hard to say.
That's, I guess we'll have to wait till the final version, but that's a really interesting question because all the grousing was that it was going to happen every week and oh my God, this is a disaster. And now you're saying if you wanted more. Jim?
Also on every reboot. It was before, not just every week, but also every reboot. And some people were saying, hey, I reboot my computer every day.
Yeah.
But
yeah, I don't know. Webb?
I was just, you guys are a lot smarter than me. What is, I understand the concept of screen recording, but in the Mac world, why is it necessary? We had this deal about, what was it, Bartender 5, and they were doing screen recording, so we all had to abandon that program. I'm trying. I understand the security risk, but I'm trying to understand the necessity of the screen recording and why you have to basically allow that privilege. And Jim or David may be able to answer that. I don't know. Or we can just not go down this rat hole, like I said in the chat. So if we don't want to go down this, I understand that too. So.
Well, if you go into systems, if you go into system settings, it says screen and system audio recording, and it says allow applications to record the content of your screen and audio, even while you are using other applications. So there's
I get that.
But that's the. But think about it. And here, right, I'm looking right now in mine. I'm a big Snagit user that does screen recording. You have to enable it on the Mac. I don't know why. I guess ICE has it too that you turn on. So I'm using, and then your browsers do it, and Zoom, and so some of these applications do require it. Even 1Password uses it too.
Barry in the chat room says many utilities need screen recording privileges just to function, even if they don't actually record anything. And Webb, that's always been my understanding is it's called screen recording. Maybe a better phrase might be screen monitoring because it needs to be able to understand what is on the screen in order to do whatever magic it does, and we're talking about just from a generic standpoint. The concern seems to have always been, though, that if it can see it, then it can record it or send it somewhere so that somebody could be seeing what you're doing.
Yeah,
it could see.
And I understand that.
Yeah, so that's a very non-technical description from my understanding, and it sounds like it jives with what Barry was saying.
Is Bartender still bad?
That's a different question.
I don't understand.
There's that wasn't the reason. That sort of raised the stakes on it. People were saying, well, Bartender was sold, and they didn't trust the new entity. The fact is that you cannot implement something like what Bartender does without having the screen recording, enabled. So, that's not like, oh, Bartender did something, they did it the way it has to be done. And any other app that does what Bartender does will also need that. And, it's a question of, do you trust that entity? Does Dave trust the people that run Snagit? Do you trust the people that implement Zoom and, implement your browser and, all these other things? Most apps don't need it, but certain apps, and it's not always obvious, because that, for example, I have a program called Xscope that you can use for measuring things on the screen and seeing, what's the color of this? Well, that needs this entitlement. I think what is the point of reminding people about this more than once? If I install it, that means I wanted this. I don't want to come back and to come back next week, next month, next year. If I want to revoke that permission, I'll uninstall the app. And the one example that somebody at Apple said was, well, what if your spouse and you have a evil spouse that installs something on your computer that you don't know about, and at first glance, well, yeah, okay, maybe, but the fact is, if there's somebody else that has enough privilege to install something like that on your computer, it's game over anyway. No reminder is gonna, they've got full access to everything you do. So popping up a note like that, it doesn't benefit. There's no situation at all where it's of any benefit to anyone. So why Apple even came up with this, I just don't understand.
I think it's just one more example of the world we live in, and Apple's trying to protect us. And I respectfully disagree, Jim. I think there is an audience out there who is concerned about, somebody being nefariously able to gain access to some of these things.
If they are able to install that software in the first place, then that means that person has your password. They have admin privileges. If someone other than you is able to install software, then no reminder pop-up is of any helpfulness at all. That's a false security blanket. You could be like, oh, okay, it's taking care of me, when it's absolutely not. Your system is compromised, and your attacker, they have access to everything you do.
So if that's the case, let me flip it around on you. What harm does it do by popping up and saying, do you want to continue to to allow this app to have screen recording access?
It's annoying. It could break automation flows. It could, for example, you could have something that runs unattended, and then this breaks that. And if I have 15 different apps that have this alert popping up, that's just damn annoying.
Yeah, Mark.
Yeah, I agree with Jim. I think that this is overarching, and I think, and the reason I was playing that Microsoft, I'm a Mac PC Vista commercial from way back, is I think it runs the risk of training people to automatically click yes, which is a guaranteed security nightmare. All I need to do is, I don't know about you guys, but nowadays they seem to get 2 or 3 times a day, the PayPal scam alert with a presumably poisonous, nefarious PDF attached, and if people get that and they're not thinking and they just click yes, that's going to create problems. And I think it's bad on Apple to induce or sort of train bad behavior on the part of users of its products. And again, I think if people want to have this thing come up every time, okay, that's fine. Make that a setting. Don't make that a requirement that Cupertino, forces down everybody's throats. If you want to make it, hard to get, buried in the system setting do this once and never bug me again. Okay, put it down 3 clicks inside the menu. There are other things that are like that, for running other, unsigned or other apps. So I think that their hearts in the right place, but I think they're just not thinking in reality of what it's going to be like for people out there have to go through this monstrosity. Already they've backed down and saying, okay, well, we'll only do it once a month. Apple, no, get your ego out of it. Recognize that you give your users a choice and let them decide. And again, as Jim was saying, if somebody has physical access to the device and they have the password so that they can install software, there's a whole bigger problem there that Apple can't do anything to solve.
I guess we'll see what happens once it actually gets into the wild, that is when it's not in beta, and see how users react and see how Apple reacts.
We're all going to be trained like yes.
Yeah.
This is like the sky is falling when we were, the story from when we were little kids. The danger is you keep telling people the sky is falling and they get used to that. And then when you have a real important thing, they're going to ignore it.
I guess we'll see.
Maybe they'll change it.
Yeah. That's always a possibility. I mean, like Mark said, they've already capitulated once on it or compromised on it. So, maybe they'll be pushed back. There'll be some going to push back later. Because once again, when this first came up a couple weeks ago, that it was going to have to be clicked every week. I mean, everybody exploded. And so now they've gone to a week. Let's see what happens. Now they've gone to a month. So, maybe it'll be every 2 months, maybe 6 months, maybe intermittently. I don't know. We'll just have to see. Visit MacVoices.com for show notes and to connect with Chuck on social media. Get involved in our Facebook group or like our Facebook page, and get more out of your Apple tech with MacVoices Magazine, free on Flipboard and on the web. And if you find value in it all, consider supporting us through either our Patreon campaign at patreon.com/MacVoices or by making a one-time donation via the PayPal link on our front page and in the show notes of each episode. You will join these fine people who help bring you Mac Voices. Advertising handled by Backbeat Media at backbeatmedia.com. Bandwidth provided by CacheFly at cachefly.com.